She's saying it is the duty of every public servant to do social justice work and to take lived experience, subjective experience, and transform it into written protection, i.e. law. This is a name that you're going to want to remember if you're in the crowd. This is Judge Trina Thompson, who wrote maybe the worst decision I've ever read on December 31st, coming out of the Northern District of California. It's up there in the pantheon of truly bad legal decisions. But what I wanted to show you, Rob, to your point about this not being an accident, this case is about the TPS program. If you follow me and Rob, you saw that during the debate we had on Somalia and Somalian refugees, I brought up the TPS program as a problem and something that needs to be looked into. And if you know the lore, the TPS program gives temporary status to people. Now, who does it give status to? People who could not be here legally. So if you could be here legally, this doesn't apply to you. So everyone who gets temporary status would otherwise be illegal, right? That's point one. But we do it for humanitarian reasons. Let's say you have an earthquake in your country and everyone's dying and they're starving. And we say, okay, you know what? We're not going to deport you. You can stay here. But it's not forever. It's temporary. It's in the name, temporary protected status, right? Look at this history. This case was about Nepal, Honduras, and Nicaragua because the Trump administration tried to terminate temporary protected status for those countries. And just to Rob's point earlier about this is not an accident, let's see if you can notice a theme as we go through this fact pattern, right? So Nepal got TPS in 2015 because of an earthquake. Okay, they had a bad earthquake. I understand. I'm sympathetic. 750,000 homes destroyed. Terrible, terrible. We should do something. I'm sympathetic. All right. And then in 2016, what happened? It was extended for 18 months. All right. In 2018, notice Trump's in office. This is Trump 1. It was extended for several years due to legal challenges to its termination. So Trump tried to end it in 2018, but there were legal challenges and it got extended. And then in 2023, the Department of Homeland Security reconsidered and did not terminate it and instead extended it. Who was in office in 2023?
Yep.
Okay. And then in June 2025, they terminated it again. And that's how we got to this case. But there's more. What about Honduras? Well, they got temporary status in 1998, Rob. 1998, they got temporary status because of heavy rain and flooding. Okay. Very serious. No problem for me. 1999, they got an extension. Over the next 20 years, it was repeatedly extended. And then what happened in 2018? Trump tried to terminate it. But there were legal challenges to the termination that resulted in its extension for several years. And then in 2023, who was in office in 2023? They reconsidered. And now temporary status continues. And then in 2025, Trump tries to terminate. But wait, there's more. Nicaragua was hit by a hurricane in 1999. The TPS was extended for nearly 2 decades until Trump, because of recurrent weather events, until Trump tried to terminate in 2017. After the termination announcement, litigation resulted in the continued extension of TPS for several years. And then in 2023, always the same year, isn't that weird? In 2023, DHS reconsidered and extended TPS through 2025. And then in 2025, Trump terminated. So I don't know, Rob. Did you notice a pattern in this factual story?
It's unbelievable, right? And just to go with DHS data that I looked through, this is from the years of 2021, the Biden administration, basically. This is surreal. This is DHS data. 8% of Nicaragua, of their entire population, entered the United States in those 4 years. 8% of the entire country. 7% of Cuba, 6% of Haiti, 5% of Honduras. Like the amount of people from countries like this that came in as a percentage of the 8% of Nicaragua, like nearly 1 in 10 and everybody in the country came into the United States in that 10 years. And then what this case specifically, and you tell me if I have this wrong, the absurdity of this was it's not even, right? I hope I got this right. It's not even necessarily that Trump's team went in and shredded up some assurance that was given by Biden. It literally expired, right? It expired, and Trump's team's like, cool, we're just not re-upping it. And the court was, which clearly should be the rule of the executive, right? If the executive or the legislative says, like, look, we are giving a protective status for people in this country, surely it should not be that unelected courts are allowed to be like, no, you can't leave that expire. You can't do it. We as the courts have decided, nope, that must continue into perpetuity. Am I reading this wrong?
Oh, no.
How could a court, like, make that decision?
Rob, it gets so much worse. You're at the tip of the iceberg of this opinion, which is one of the worst pieces of garbage I've ever read. But to your point, you made 2 points I think are really important. 1999, 1998. These have been on this temporary status has been on the books for 27, 28 years. So yeah, in that time, you're going to get a tremendous number of people. And one of the things we've covered on this channel quite a lot is birthright citizenship. So think about this. In 28 years, how many kids did they have here? Well, all those kids are citizens. All those kids are citizens. That's 2 generations of citizens, right? So this is enormous to the population of these nations, enormous to the population of the US. It's a huge percentage. But the actual decision, Rob, is somehow even dumber than what you just said. It's worse than what you just said. Because let me show you how crazy this is. One of the first, they're very upset. You know, they give a lot of history, but you know, if you want to see a full breakdown, I have a full breakdown on my channel. If you want to see like line by line, you can come check it out. But that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to give you the highlights here. So part A of the decision, the first question, the Trump administration moved to dismiss. They said, you don't have jurisdiction to hear this case under 8 U.S.C. 1254 subpart A. Now, okay, that's a pretty big deal. If the court doesn't have jurisdiction, they can't decide this. That would be fatal. That's a pretty big issue. Now, why does the Trump administration think that they don't have jurisdiction? The court doesn't have jurisdiction. Well, let's see. Defendants argue that there is no judicial review of any determination of the secretary with respect to the designation or termination or extension of a designation under TPS. So the Trump administration has said, if we terminate a designation, to your point, Rob, we're not vacating it. It exists. We're not vacating it where, okay, it's supposed to go another 3 months and we're canceling that. It expired and we're just not re-upping. That's what terminate means in this context. There is no judicial review. That's what they argued. Now, why do they think that? I went to the law to look. Now, I know you're not a lawyer, Rob. This is a complicated legal argument. See if you can follow. This is what Congress wrote. There is no judicial review of any determination of the Attorney General with respect to the designation or termination of a designation. This is not a complicated legal argument. Congress wrote, there is no review. So there should be no review. You would think any self-respecting judge would read this and say, there is no judicial review seems like the sort of thing that might prevent me from doing judicial review. Rob, do you think that Judge Thompson read this and said no more judicial review? What do you think?
Of course not, because she's like so many of these judges, they're interested in writing the law. If it's a law they don't like, it doesn't matter if it's legal. They just say, we'll go beyond what's afforded to us in the Constitution as members of the judiciary, and we'll act like legislators and say, nope, we'll rip that law up. So that's exactly what this is, activism under the guise of, jurisprudence.
Oh, Rob, yes. I mean, we're going to peel back the layers of the onion about how crazy this is, but you're 100% right. You called the ball in the air. So what did she do? She said, well, any determination for which I have no review should mean the single act of deciding. What's the determination? I can't review the decision, but surely I can review. But plaintiffs do not challenge the singular decision. They challenge the decision-making process. So, So we're not challenging that Secretary Noem said terminate. We're challenging the way she thought about it. I mean, again, this is an argument only a lawyer could come up with, right? Like you think that when Congress said, and again, I just want to show the chat because this is so clear, no judicial review. They said, oh, no judicial review for when they write it on the paper. But of course, you can challenge everything they did up to that point and say they were wrong to write it on the paper and that they weren't allowed to write it on the paper. But you can't challenge the writing on the paper itself. It's make-believe. I don't know what else to call it, Rob. This is insane.
I mean, if I'm trying to steelman her position, is what she's trying to say here, like the Trump administration so corrupt or incompetent that if it would be a competent administration, then I wouldn't be allowed to review this. But because they're not, it's not that I'm reviewing the decision. I'm reviewing the corruption or incompetence of the people making the decision. Is that what she's attempting to say here?
Basically, yeah, that is the TLDR. But the crazy part about it is that wasn't the only ground. There's other parts of the law that prevented the decision. 1251 says no injunctions, and she issued an injunction. She doesn't care. She finds a way that she can do an injunction anyway. 1252. Also, what does it say? It says there are no conditions that the secretary must satisfy before she can exercise her authority. So whatever problems you have with the process don't matter because there are no conditions required. They can make the decision for any reason. Doesn't care about that aspect of the law. That's totally fine. The Administrative Procedure Act says that she can't make an Administrative Procedure Act ruling if a statute precludes judicial review or if the action is committed to the agency discretion by law, which this was. But she doesn't care. She blows past that one too. And then, surprise, surprise, after totally ignoring the law in 4 separate places, she rules against the Trump administration. I know that's a shocker to you, Rob. You probably couldn't tell. Yeah. But here's the cherry on top, and this is the thing that really black-pilled me. And then I'll give you the good news. I know this is the bad news, but I'll give you the good news in a second. After this 50-page nonsense opinion, again, if you want to see a full breakdown, check out my channel. I've got a video up. But at the very end, she writes a conclusion. And I've never seen a judge give a game away in the same way. Look, I just want to read you one paragraph. Our laws should not favor the loud and powerful simply because of their positions. The positions here being the president and his cabinet. You think that maybe the president and his cabinet have some say in the law, but no. You shouldn't favor them because of their positions. Yet for too long, our laws have overlooked the quiet truths. Truths carried in the margins, truths lived but never spoken aloud. And here's the kicker. It is the duty of every public servant who are entrusted with shaping a more just society to bring those truths into the open, to translate lived experience into written protection. What's she saying? She's saying it is the duty of every public servant to do social justice work and to take lived experience, subjective experience, and transform it into written protection, i.e. law. She is openly saying that she views the role of a judge is to translate personal subjective experience into binding law that governs America.
Which is sort of the complete antithesis of what the law is supposed to be and what the role of a judge is supposed to be. Well, but my feelings are as such. So Constitution be damned, laws be damned. I'm going to put what I want the outcomes to be, and I'll make the law malleable to achieve that. It's surreal.
It's shocking, Rob. It's shocking. I mean, first of all, judges are not supposed to be engaged in making a more just society. Judges are supposed to be interpreting the law and the Constitution, right? If you want to make society different, talk to your congressman. That's what they're for. Judges are not supposed to change society. They're supposed to keep the boat on the water, right? Don't let the boat tip over. Keep the law. That's what they're supposed to do. But then this idea that she thinks there's a duty to translate lived experience into written protection. I mean, my jaw hit the floor, Rob. And this actually did blackpill me quite a bit because I've been on the show and I've said, oh, judicial activism, I understand. It couldn't. And this is not every judge. Most judges I've worked with are not like this. I'm not going to call this the majority, but that's a crazy thing to write. I've never, that's open color revolution talk, basically, where you're saying, we think that the law is whatever we feel the law should be.
It's unreal. And by the way, there's this thing that happens politically a lot, which is if there's a lot of accusations or if there's a lot of things that happen, then the specific details of them become irrelevant. And all that matters is, well, there has to be some fire there because look at all the smoke. One of the things I see over and over again, when you see decisions like this, it just gets lumped into a big, look at how many times the courts have ruled against Trump. Look at it, you see? And then oftentimes you go through the details and you see stuff like this, you're like, this is a joke. When we have all these people in the legal system that adapt this mentality, which is just like, well, we personally believe that Trump's a loathsome person and that the policies he is doing are inhumane. And we're going to use our personal lived experience to fight back. Well, then all of a sudden it makes sense why it's like, oh, well, all of these cases go against Trump. And then as you know, and I bet this is where we're going to get here, I'm not quite sure, but oftentimes a lot of these lower rulings, as they get appealed up, the further up courts are like, no, this is laughable, and they overrule it. And I'm guessing that's exactly what happened here.
Yes, Rob, you're psychic as always. The Ninth Circuit, not a famously Republican circuit. It used to be very left-leaning. Now it's 50-50 because there's been a lot of Trump appointees. But the Ninth Circuit overruled this travesty of a decision. But the thing about this is, imagine all the hoops this judge had to jump through to issue this ruling. 4 different segments of the law said she had no jurisdiction and bypassed them all in order to get where she wanted to go. There's no way Trump could win in this court. There's no way. Of course he lost. So he probably lost every case before this judge. And there's probably a handful of other judges like this one. And look, lawyers are sophisticated. Plaintiffs know if I want to bring a case, there's certain places to go. District Massachusetts, get Boasberg, go to Northern District of California. They know where the sympathetic judges are. But you got to take, so when you hear Trump loses 100 cases, okay, ask how many of them were appealed and how did that go, right? Because they're getting overturned. And this one got overturned very quickly. That was, on February 9th. So this is somewhat recent news. And by the way, this is what a legal opinion is supposed to look at, by the way, for those of you who are wondering. No fancy language, all legalese, just saying, what happened? Well, they gave this order. What's the problem with the order? Well, if you scroll down, they give some background. They say, look, the order gave an injunctive relief against Trump. Now, if we're going to stay the order pending appeal, they haven't decided yet. It's just whether they're going to stay the lower court order while they review. They need to decide, amongst other things, and the most important is whether the stay applicant has made a strong showing he's likely to succeed on the merits, whether or not it's likely that they're going to overturn that decision. And the first thing they said is, we conclude the government is likely to succeed on the merits. And then why? Why are they likely to succeed on the merits? Because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that the phrase no review is interpreted to mean review. Like that, it's not really more complicated than that. It's very, very easy. But then beyond that, they make a point that I think is very important. They notice that they're not writing on a blank slate because the Supreme Court, to your point, Rob, has twice stayed district court orders blocking TPS review for Venezuela. So the Supreme Court has had these things come up and the court has said, no. This is nonsense. We're not doing that. It's nonsense. And the Ninth Circuit, because they're sane, has noticed this. And they said, well, if the Supreme Court's going to rule that way, we should rule the same way because the Supreme Court's the law of the land. So at least there's some hope left, because if you have the whole judiciary corrupt, then you're out of luck. You're done. It's time to start impeaching people or talk about more drastic solutions. But here you have the Ninth Circuit remedying the problem, right? And they did it cleanly and simply, and they did it logically and lawfully. And that's what we want. And this is why, by the way, when people tell me, because, Rob, historically, I voted Democrat for a long time. And people say, like, how come you're fire breathing on the right these days and you're not trying to toe some kind of centrist line? And it's because of this. The Democrats have said they're going to pack the court. The Democrats have said that they're going to replace all these judges with judges they prefer. And I've seen what kind of judges they prefer, Rob. I've seen what kind of judges they prefer. And we can't have that. We just can't.
It's the last time we did a show, I actually think I was beginning to read this decision. Neither of us had read it because it had came out like that day, I believe. Mm-hmm. You were going through a decision where, if people remember, basically you were like, good luck finding out what the facts of this were, because the judge is just like, he's quoting Bible verses and he's like wagging his finger, but he's not really explaining what the actual case was about. It just seems like he's standing on his soapbox saying, like, this is outrageous. And it's like, but what? When you have, like, I want to be very careful before I say what I'm going to say next, because I think even judges, justices, attorneys, etc., that massively I disagree with, like, on how they interpret the law and shit, that room should be given. Clearly, good faith people could have immense disagreements on the application of the law. But when you see things like this specific judge here, what is the recourse for, like, some sort of punishment for a judge that's just like, you know what, fuck you, I'm not even going to pretend that I give a shit. Like, if this just becomes the norm, because for her personally, this is going to get her invited to all the nice cocktail parties with the people on the left, and it allows the media to write these stories. Oh, Trump loses again in court. And as you know, NBC will be happy to write he loses. Probably aren't beating their chest as much as like, oh, by the way, that was overturned in short order. So, like, what do we do as a society if we see this increasingly happening? More and more justices or judges just like, I don't even give a shit. I'm just going to do whatever I feel like.
Well, this is why I call what I'm doing the reasonable right. Like, I think that you can't possibly support more of judges of this type being appointed to lifetime appointments. Lifetime appointments. They get to do this for the rest of their life. So the recourse is that you have to win elections, Rob. You have to win elections, because if you don't control the presidency, you don't control the nominations. It's really as simple as that. And there is a fight, and people, I don't know, sometimes this gets poo-pooed like it's only one issue among many, but for me, this is nearly a single issue voter status point for me. Originalism protects you against this kind of judge, right? If judges are originalists, they are attempting to implement what the law meant, not what they think it should mean in their imagination today. And you've seen originalist judges do not universally side with the president that appointed them. We've seen Justice Barrett side against Trump a few times. And she's originalist to her core because she's a judge first and she's not a political creature. That's the kind of thing we need. And if the left is going to persist in appointing these political radical subjectivists to the bench, I mean, that paragraph I read to you, Rob, like, I know you've seen the debates that Andrew Wilson has with people, where he'll say to them, like, what's your grounding for that? How do you ground your ethic, right? That's the legal equivalent of what Andrew's doing. They say, like, well, how do you ground that out? And they're like, well, I think subjective truth should be law. It's like, holy shit, that can't be your legal theory. Like, that there's no universe where that's an acceptable thing for a judge to say. It can't be the case. It's nonsense, and everyone knows it. And if one party is going to continuously nominate this sort of judges, they have to be stopped. I don't know what else to say about it.